I spent 43 minutes standing in front of the mirror that morning, trying to decide if the coat looked stupid on me. It was deep navy blue with silver hardware, the kind of coat that made me look like I belonged somewhere better than the grind coffee shop at 5:30 a.m. The kind of coat that costs 3 weeks of grocery money and 2 months of telling myself I didn't really need it. But I did need it. My old thrift store parka had finally given up the ghost last winter, the zipper breaking in the middle of February when the temperature hit -15. I'd spent 3 weeks layering hoodies under a denim jacket that did absolutely nothing against the Midwestern wind. 3 weeks of arriving at work shivering so hard I couldn't hold a coffee cup steady. 3 weeks of telling myself that next year I'd buy something decent. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Tessa, and I'm 29 years old. I work 2 jobs and live in an apartment where the heat barely works and the landlord acts like fixing anything is a personal favor. The coat was supposed to be my reward for finally saving enough for a house down payment, a symbol that I was moving up in the world, that all those double shifts and skip dinners had been worth something. "It looks good," I told my reflection, and for once I almost believed it. The morning rush at the grind was typical chaos. Commuters desperate for caffeine, college students paying with crumpled bills, the usual mix of politeness and barely contained panic that came with Monday mornings. I was working the espresso machine when I heard the familiar laugh that made my stomach clench. "Tessa!" Brianna burst through the door like she was announcing herself at a party, her 2 kids trailing behind her like tired accessories. My older sister had this way of entering rooms that demanded attention, even at a coffee shop where everyone just wanted their caffeine fix and to be left alone. She looked tired, though. More tired than usual. Her highlights needed touching up, and her designer jeans had a small stain near the knee that she was trying to cover with her purse strap. "I didn't know you were working today," she said, settling the kids at a corner table with iPads that were definitely newer than my phone. "The usual?" I recited, already reaching for a cup. "Large latte, extra shot, oat milk." "You're the best." She watched me work, that familiar expression on her face that meant she wanted something. "Actually, Tess, I was hoping to catch you. Are you free for dinner Sunday? Mom's making pot roast." Sunday dinner at Mom's house. The weekly performance where we all pretended to be a functional family for 2 hours while Mom orchestrated conversations like a director managing a play. I'd been skipping them lately, claiming work conflicts that weren't entirely lies. "I don't know, I might have to work." I handed her the coffee and started on the hot chocolates. "The new manager's been scheduling weird shifts." "Come on, it's been weeks. Mom misses you." Brianna's voice had that wheedling tone that meant she'd already promised Mom I'd be there. "Besides, I have some good news to share." The kids' drinks were ready, but I found myself taking longer than necessary to add whipped cream. "Good news?" She grabbed the cups and headed toward her table, then turned back. "Oh, and Tess, that coat is gorgeous. Really expensive looking." She said it like a compliment, but something in her tone made me touch the collar self-consciously, like she was taking inventory. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of steamed milk and small talk. I kept thinking about Brianna's expression when she'd mentioned the coat, the way her eyes had lingered on the silver buttons, the careful way she'd said, "expensive looking." By the time I clocked out at 2, the sky had turned that particular shade of gray that meant snow was coming. Real snow, not the dusting we'd been getting all week. I pulled my new coat tighter as I walked to my car, allowing myself a moment of satisfaction at how warm it kept me. The dispatcher job started at 6 p.m. and ran till midnight. 6 hours of taking emergency calls and coordinating responses. 6 hours of listening to people's worst moments through a headset while I sat in a fluorescent lit room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid better than most jobs that didn't require a degree I couldn't afford. And it was steady, reliable. The kind of job that let me save money for something better. Between calls, I found myself browsing real estate listings on my phone. 3-bedroom houses with actual yards, apartments with dishwashers and laundry hookups, places where the heat worked and the neighbors didn't have screaming matches at 3 a.m., places that were still months away but getting closer every paycheck. Maya texted around 10. "How's the coat? Still love it?"
Best purchase ever, I typed back. Warm and waterproof and makes me look like a functional adult. Good. Stop feeling guilty about spending money on necessities. Maya had been my voice of reason since we'd worked together at The Grind 3 years ago. She'd moved to Chicago for a better job, but we talked daily. She was the only person who understood why buying a decent coat had felt like such a big deal. Family dinner Sunday, I added. Brianna says she has news. Ominous. What kind of news? The kind that somehow involves me giving up something I want. Don't. Whatever it is, just say no. Easy for her to say. Maya hadn't grown up in a family where no was treated like a personal attack, where every family gathering came with an unspoken expectation that Tessa would be reasonable, Tessa would understand, Tessa would sacrifice whatever was necessary to keep the peace. Sunday came with a light snow that made everything look deceptively peaceful. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment and avoiding my mother's increasingly frequent texts about dinner timing and what I should bring and whether I needed directions, like I hadn't been driving to my childhood home for over a decade. I changed clothes twice before settling on jeans and a sweater that didn't look too worn. The kind of outfit that said I was doing fine without broadcasting exactly how fine or not fine I actually was. I left the new coat in the closet, opting for my backup jacket. Something made me want to keep the coat private for a while longer. Mom's house looked exactly the same as always, small and tidy with generic seasonal decorations that she rotated religiously. Brianna's car was already in the driveway, along with Dad's truck. Through the kitchen window, I could see them gathered around the table, and for a moment, I considered turning around and driving home. "Tessa!" Mom enveloped me in a hug that smelled like her familiar perfume and pot roast. "I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "Traffic," I lied, hanging my jacket on the hook by the door. The dining room had been set with Mom's good plates, the ones she usually saved for holidays. Brianna was helping the kids cut their meat, while Dad and her ex-husband Clay discussed something work-related. It was aggressively normal, which meant something was definitely wrong. "So," Mom said once we'd all been served and the obligatory comments about the food had been made, "Brianna has some exciting news to share." My sister's face lit up with the kind of smile she used to have as a kid when she'd won something. "I got the promotion at the marketing firm, senior account manager, 20% raise, the whole package." "That's great," I said, and meant it. Brianna's good at her job when she applies herself. "Congratulations." "There's more," she continued, glancing at Clay. "We've been talking, and with my new salary and the kids getting older, we think it might be time to try again. Not romantically," she added quickly, "but as co-parents. Maybe moving into a house together, splitting expenses, giving the kids more stability." The table erupted in congratulations and questions about neighborhoods and school districts. I nodded and smiled in the right places, but something felt off. Brianna was glowing, but there was tension around her eyes, and Clay looked uncomfortable, like he was going along with something he hadn't entirely agreed to. "The only thing is," Brianna said, her voice taking on that careful tone that meant we were getting to the real point of this dinner, "house shopping in this market is brutal. Everything decent is so expensive, and with my student loans and Clay's debt, we're going to need help with the down payment." And there it was. The reason for the good plates and the carefully orchestrated family dinner. "How much help?" Dad asked, already reaching for his wallet mentally. "We've got most of it," Clay said quickly. "We just need maybe $5,000 or $6,000 to make the numbers work, something we could pay back over time." $5,000 or $6,000, a significant chunk of my carefully saved house fund.
I felt like I was watching this conversation from underwater. They were already planning how to distribute my money without asking if I had it to give. "Actually," Brianna said, turning to me with that smile that had been getting her out of trouble since we were kids, "we were hoping Tessa might be able to help too. I know you've been saving money and you don't have a mortgage or kids or anything really tying you down. The phrase hit me like cold water. Anything really tying me down. As if my dreams of owning a home, of building something for myself, were just hobbies I could abandon whenever someone else had a more important need. I don't know, I said carefully. I've been saving for my own place. This place is perfect for you, Mom said, gesturing around her small kitchen. You're young and single. You don't need much space. I'm 29. Exactly, Brianna jumped in. You have so much time to save again. I'm at a different stage of life. The kids need stability, and this is our chance to give them that. I looked around the table at these people I'd loved my whole life. At Brianna, who'd never worked 2 jobs or eaten ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. At my parents, who'd helped her with her wedding, her car payments, her emergency expenses for years. At Clay, who couldn't meet my eyes. How much are you asking for? I said. Just $4,000, Brianna said quickly. I know it sounds like a lot, but think of it as an investment in your niece and nephew's future. $4,000? 2 months of my dispatcher's salary, a quarter of what I'd saved for my own future. I need to think about it, I said carefully. Of course, Mom said, but her tone suggested thinking was just a formality. Take all the time you need. They spent the rest of dinner discussing mortgage rates and school districts and paint colors. I nodded and made appropriate sounds, while internally calculating how long it would take to rebuild my savings if I said yes. As we were clearing the table, Brianna cornered me in the kitchen. I know it's a big ask, she said, loading plates into the dishwasher. But you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. The kids have been through so much with the divorce, and this could really give them the stable home they deserve. What about your raise? Can't you save up for a few more months? The market's so competitive right now. If we wait, prices will just go up more. She touched my arm. You're the most generous person I know, Tess, and you're so good with money. You'll build your savings back up in no time. Generous, good with money. Code words for reliable sucker who won't say no. I helped finish the dishes in silence, then said my goodbyes and headed home. The snow was falling harder now, and I was grateful I'd chosen the sensible jacket over the new coat. The roads were getting slick. Maya called as I was unlocking my apartment door. How is the family dinner of manipulation? She asked without preamble. They want $4,000 for Brianna's house down payment. Silence. Then, are you kidding me? She got a promotion. She and Clay want to buy a house together for the kids' stability. They just need a little help with the down payment. And they asked you because? Because I don't have kids or a mortgage or anything really tying me down. Tessa, Maya's voice was sharp. Tell me you said no. I said I'd think about it. What's to think about? It's your money. You saved it for your own house. It's for the kids. It's for Brianna, like it always is, Maya sighed. Remember when she needed help with her car payment and her credit card debt and her security deposit for the new apartment?
I did remember. A long string of emergencies and opportunities that somehow always required my financial assistance. Small amounts that added up to years of my dreams being delayed for everyone else's immediate needs. This is different, I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Is it? Because from here, it looks exactly the same. After Maya hung up, I sat on my couch looking around my tiny apartment. The apartment I'd been trying to escape for 3 years. The apartment that would be my home for at least another year if I gave Brianna that money. But she was right about the kids. They did deserve stability. And I was good at saving money. I could rebuild what I gave up. Couldn't I? The call came Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for my coffee shop shift. I was reaching for my new coat when my phone buzzed with Mom's ringtone. Tessa, honey, I hope I'm not calling too early. It's fine, Mom. What's up? Well, I was just thinking about Sunday dinner, and I wanted to talk to you about Brianna's situation.
Mom's voice had that carefully modulated tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news, disguised as reasonable conversation. I know you said you needed to think about helping with the house, but I was wondering if you'd made a decision. I hadn't. I'd spent 2 days mentally going back and forth, calculating and recalculating my savings timeline, trying to figure out if I could afford to be generous or if I should finally learn to say no. I'm still thinking, I said, pulling the coat off its hanger. Of course, take your time. But actually, there's something else. I was at Brianna's yesterday helping with the kids, and I noticed she's been wearing that old jacket of hers to work, the one with the broken zipper. Apparently, her heat pump died over the weekend, and with the repair costs and everything, she can't afford a decent winter coat right now. I felt a familiar sinking sensation in my stomach. Okay. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was wondering if maybe you could loan her that beautiful new coat you bought, just temporarily until she gets back on her feet. I know you have other jackets, and she's got important client meetings this week. First impressions matter in her line of work. My coat? Just as a loan, Mom said quickly. She'd take excellent care of it, and honestly, with her new position, she really needs to look professional. You understand. I stared at my reflection in the bedroom mirror, holding the coat that had represented everything I was working toward. The coat I'd finally bought for myself after years of wearing other people's discarded clothes. Mom, I just bought this coat. It's the only warm one I have. Honey, I saw that jacket you wore to dinner Sunday. It's perfectly adequate for someone in your position. Brianna's in client-facing work now. She needs to project success. Someone in your position. As if working 2 jobs to save money was somehow less legitimate than Brianna's marketing career. As if my need to stay warm mattered less than her need to look successful. I don't think... It would just be for a few weeks, Mom interrupted, until she can buy her own. And honestly, sharing clothes is what sisters do. Remember how you used to wear Quinn's hand-me-downs? Quinn, my older sister who'd moved to California years ago and conveniently disappeared whenever family financial crises arose. The sister whose clothes I wore because we couldn't afford new ones for both of us. The sister who'd never been asked to give up something she'd saved for and bought herself. This is different, Mom. I bought this with my own money. I know you did, sweetheart, and it's beautiful. That's exactly why Brianna needs it right now. She's trying to establish herself in a new role. I closed my eyes and saw the next few hours playing out. The guilt trips, the phone calls, the family group text messages about how I was being selfish while Brianna struggled, the way they'd frame my reluctance as petty jealousy instead of reasonable boundaries. She can pick it up this afternoon, I said quietly.
Aw, thank you, honey. You're such a good sister. Brianna will be so grateful. I hung up and stared at the coat in my hands. 3 weeks of grocery money and 2 months of convincing myself I deserved it. Gone in a 5-minute phone call, wrapped in guilt and family obligation. My backup jacket was hanging in the closet where I left it Sunday night. Thin and inadequate, but perfectly functional for someone in my position. I put it on and tried not to think about how the zipper stuck or how the wind cut through the worn spots. Brianna arrived at the coffee shop during my lunch break, looking apologetic but determined. "Tess, I can't tell you how much this means to me," she said, accepting the coat like it was always meant to be hers. "I promise I'll take excellent care of it, and as soon as I can afford a new one, I'll give this right back." "How's your heat pump?" I asked. "Oh, that," she waved dismissively. "Clay's friend is going to fix it for cost. It's not as bad as we thought." "But you can't afford a winter coat?" Brianna's expression shifted slightly. "Well, I could, but with the house hunting and everything, I need to be careful with money right now. You understand." I watched her run her hands over the coat sleeves, already making it hers. "Sure.
Besides, this is so much nicer than anything I would have bought. It's perfect for client meetings. She checked her reflection in the coffee shop window, adjusting the collar. I might get the name of the brand when I'm ready to buy my own, I mean. She left with my coat and a promise to absolutely give it back soon, and I spent the rest of my shift in the backup jacket that made me look like a college student who'd gotten dressed in the dark. Maya texted that evening, "Please, tell me you didn't give them the money." Worse, I gave them my coat. My phone rang immediately. "Your coat? The coat you just bought?" "It's just temporary," I said, repeating Mom's words and hating how hollow they sounded. "Brianna needs it for work meetings. Tessa, listen to me very carefully. You will never see that coat again." She promised to pay you back for the car payment too, and the credit card help. How did that work out? I didn't answer because we both knew the truth. Brianna's promises were like her diet plans and her organizational systems. Well-intentioned, but ultimately abandoned when something more appealing came along. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" Maya asked, her voice gentle now. "It's just a coat." "No, it's not. It's about respect. It's about your family treating you like your needs don't matter. It's about you being so afraid of conflict that you give away pieces of yourself to keep everyone else happy." After she hung up, I sat in my thin jacket and tried to remember the last time I'd said no to a family request. The last time I'd put my own needs ahead of someone else's convenience. The last time anyone had asked what I wanted, instead of assuming I'd give up whatever was required. I couldn't remember. Outside my window, the snow was falling harder. The weather forecast was calling for a major storm system moving in from the west, the kind of storm that required good boots and warm coats and common sense about driving on icy roads. The kind of storm where having proper winter gear wasn't just about comfort. It was about survival. The weather alert came through my dispatcher radio at 11:43 p.m. on Thursday. All units, National Weather Service has issued a blizzard warning for the Tri-County area. Storm system expected to arrive Friday evening with sustained winds of 40 to 50 miles per hour and snow accumulation of 8 to 12 inches. Temperature drop to -10 degrees. Avoid unnecessary travel.
I looked out the window of the dispatch center at the parking lot that was already accumulating a thin layer of ice. My backup jacket hung on the chair behind me, looking even more inadequate under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Big storm coming," said Janet, the veteran dispatcher working the next shift. "Good thing you've got that warm coat I saw you wearing last week." "Yeah," I said, not bothering to explain that the warm coat was currently hanging in my sister's closet while she attended client meetings that were apparently more important than my basic survival needs. I clocked out at midnight and walked to my car through the kind of wind that cuts straight through thin fabric and settled into your bones. The backup jacket's broken zipper meant cold air rushed in with every step. By the time I reached my car, my hands were numb enough that I fumbled with the keys. At home, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Brianna and a text. "Can we talk? It's about the coat." My heart jumped. Maybe she was calling to return it early, realizing she didn't actually need it for every single work interaction. Maybe her heat pump was fixed and she'd remembered her promise about taking care of it temporarily. I called her back. "Tess, thank God," she said, and I could hear kids arguing in the background. "I need to ask you a huge favor." Not returning the coat then. Asking for more. "What's up?" "So, remember how I said Clay's friend was going to fix the heat pump? Well, it turns out it's more complicated than we thought. The whole system needs to be replaced, and with this storm coming, we can't wait. The kids have been sleeping in our bedroom with space heaters, and it's just not safe." I waited, knowing there was more coming. "The thing is, we found a guy who can install a new system tomorrow, but he wants payment up front, cash. And with the house down payment we're trying to save..." She trailed off meaningfully. "How much?" "$3,000.
I know it's a lot, but if we don't get heat before this storm hits, we could have frozen pipes, structural damage. It could end up costing way more. $3,000. Almost everything I had left after mentally allocating money for her house fund. The remainder of my carefully saved nest egg. All of it. Gone. To solve problems that weren't mine, to fund dreams that weren't mine, to keep other people warm while I shivered in an adequate jacket. I opened my laptop and looked at the house listings I had bookmarked. The cozy 2-bedroom with the updated kitchen, the small place with the fenced yard, the apartment with the washer and dryer hookups, all of them moving further away like mirages that disappeared when you got close. Maya called as I was transferring the money. Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. The kids need heat, Maya. There's a blizzard coming. And what about when you need heat? What about when your car breaks down or you lose your job or have a medical emergency? What about your own life? I can rebuild. No! Her voice was sharp. Stop saying that. You've been rebuilding for years. Every time you get close to something for yourself, they find a reason why you should give it up. This is your entire savings, Tess.
It's just money. It's 3 years of your life. 3 years of working 2 jobs and eating ramen and saying no to everything fun because you were building something. And they took it away with a phone call. I stared at my bank balance. $347.23. Less than I'd made in my first week at the coffee shop. I have to go, I said. The storm's coming and I need to get groceries before everything closes. Friday morning brought the kind of gray sky that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. I'd barely slept, partly from anxiety about the storm and partly from the sick feeling in my stomach, every time I thought about my bank balance. I was scraping ice off my windshield when someone called my name. Rough morning for car maintenance. I looked up to see my neighbor from 4B walking toward me with a proper ice scraper and a travel mug of coffee that was still steaming in the cold air. Liam something. He'd moved in about 6 months ago, but we'd only exchanged the usual hallway pleasantries. Tell me about it, I said, chipping ineffectively at the ice with an old credit card. My scraper broke last week. Here. He handed me his scraper without being asked. I've got another one in my truck. The scraper worked infinitely better than my makeshift solution. Within minutes, my windshield was clear enough to see through. Thank you, I said, handing it back. I owe you one? Don't worry about it. He gestured toward my jacket. That doesn't look warm enough for what's coming tonight. I glanced down at the thin material that was already letting cold air through to my skin. It's fine. I'm a paramedic, he said gently. I've responded to hypothermia calls. That jacket isn't going to cut it if you get stuck somewhere. I have a warmer coat, I lied. This is just for quick trips. He studied my face for a moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through me. Well, if you need anything during the storm, I'm in 4B. I've got a generator and plenty of supplies. Thanks, but I'm sure I'll be fine. As I drove to work, I found myself thinking about his offer. When was the last time someone had offered to help me without expecting something in return? When was the last time someone had noticed I might need help at all? The coffee shop was busy with people stocking up on caffeine before the storm hit. Everyone was talking about preparations, extra food, flashlights, making sure their cars were ready. I listened to customers discuss their storm plans and realized I didn't really have one beyond hoping my heat didn't go out. You ready for tonight? Asked Marcus, the assistant manager, during a brief lull. As ready as anyone can be, I guess. Smart to live in an apartment building. At least if the power goes out, you've got neighbors close by. He paused. You do have warm clothes, right? Weather Service is saying this could be really dangerous. I'm good, I said automatically, the same lie I'd been telling myself for days. But I wasn't good. I was about to face a potentially life-threatening storm in a jacket that barely qualified as outerwear, with no money left for emergencies, all because my family had convinced me that my needs were always less important than their wants. The lunch rush was lighter than usual as people hurried home to prepare. I was cleaning the espresso machine when Brianna walked in. And for a moment, my heart lifted. She was wearing my coat. But maybe she was here to return it before the storm hit?
Tess! She looked radiant, glowing with the kind of satisfaction that came from solving all your problems at someone else's expense. I wanted to catch you before the storm. The heating guy's coming this afternoon, and I just can't thank you enough. That's great, I said. I'm glad the kids will be warm. Oh, they will be. The new system is top of the line. Programmable thermostat, zone heating, the works. She adjusted my coat's collar, completely unconscious of the irony. And the best part is Clay found out his company has an emergency home repair program. They're going to reimburse us for most of the cost.
I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Reimburse you? Isn't that amazing? Clay didn't think to check before, but apparently they cover heating emergencies up to $5,000. We'll get the money back in a few weeks. $5,000, more than enough to cover the heating system and still have money left over. Money that would come back to them while my savings account sat empty. So you'll be able to pay me back right away? I said. Well, Brianna's expression shifted slightly. That money will probably go toward the house down payment, to replace what we had to spend on the heating system. But don't worry, with my raise and the money we'll save on rent when we move in together, we'll be able to pay you back faster than we originally planned. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. They would get their money back, but I wouldn't get mine. My emergency fund would remain empty while they used their reimbursement to fund their house purchase, the house I was also being asked to help pay for. What about the coat? I asked quietly. Oh, she looked down like she'd forgotten she was wearing it. Right. The thing is, with the storm coming and all my client meetings next week, I was hoping I could hang on to it a little longer, just until I can shop for my own. You understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that I was standing in a coffee shop in an inadequate jacket while my sister wore my coat and spent my money and asked me to understand why she needed both more than I did. Actually, I said, I need it back, tonight. Brianna blinked, clearly taken aback. Tonight? But, Tess, the storm. I know about the storm. That's why I need my coat back. But I don't have anything else warm enough, and I have a client dinner tomorrow night. Brianna, my voice was steadier than I felt. It's my coat. I need it back. For a moment, we stared at each other across the counter. Then her face softened into the expression she'd used since childhood when she wanted to get her way. Of course it's your coat, Tess. I never said it wasn't. I just thought, with everything you've done to help us this week and knowing how generous you are, she reached across the counter to touch my hand. I thought you'd want to help a little longer. Generous. That word again. The word they used to make my boundaries sound like character flaws. I'll drop it off after my client dinner, she said before I could respond. Late tomorrow night after the storm passes, I promise. She left before I could object, the silver buttons of my coat catching the light as she pushed through the door into the gray afternoon. The storm hit at exactly 6:47 p.m. when I was driving home from my dispatcher shift. One moment, the roads were just wet and slushy. The next, I was crawling through a wall of snow that made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. My car's heater was barely keeping up, and the backup jacket provided no warmth at all. Cold air seeped through every gap and opening until I was shivering so hard I could barely keep my hands steady on the steering wheel. What should have been a 15-minute drive took 45 minutes of white-knuckled terror on roads that were rapidly becoming impassable. I made it to my apartment building just as the snow started accumulating faster than the city plows could clear it. In the lobby, I ran into Liam coming back from what looked like a supply run. Rough drive? He asked, taking in my chattering teeth and the way I was hugging myself for warmth. A little, I managed. He looked at my jacket with the same expression he'd had that morning, professional concern mixed with something that might have been frustration. I meant what I said about having supplies if you need anything. I'm okay.
Tessa! He said my name like he was trying to get through to someone who wasn't thinking clearly. The temperature's supposed to drop to -10 tonight. If your heat goes out, it won't. But if it does, he pulled a business card from his wallet and wrote something on the back. That's my cell phone. Call me. I'm serious.
I took the card, mostly to end the conversation. Thanks. In my apartment, I turned the heat up as high as it would go and made a cup of tea to warm up from the inside. The wind outside was getting stronger, rattling the windows and making the whole building creak in ways that didn't sound entirely structural. My phone rang at 11:23 p.m. Mom's ringtone. "Tessa, thank goodness you're awake. What's wrong?" I could hear wind howling in the background of the call. "It's your father. He went out to move his truck before the storm got worse, and now he can't get the car out of the driveway. There's so much snow, and the wind is it's terrible out here." I looked out my window at the blizzard that was turning the parking lot into an Arctic wasteland. Can't he wait until morning, when the plows come through? He tried, but the snow is so deep now, and it's still coming down. If we don't get the car moved tonight, it's going to be completely buried by morning. And you know your father's back isn't what it used to be. Dad was 62 and in decent shape, but he did have chronic back problems from years of mechanic work. Still, this seemed like exactly the kind of situation where the smart thing to do was wait for help, not risk going out in dangerous conditions. "Maybe you should call a towing service," I suggested. "In this weather? They're all busy with emergencies. Besides, we just need someone to help dig and push. It wouldn't take long with 2 people. I closed my eyes, knowing where this was heading. "Mom, I was hoping you might be able to come over and help. I know it's a lot to ask with the storm and everything, but you're so good in situations like this, and you're the only one who lives close enough." The only one who lives close enough. Not the only one available or the only one willing to help. The only one whose safety and comfort were considered expendable enough to risk in a blizzard. "Mom, it's almost midnight. The roads are completely iced over." "I know, honey, but you're such a careful driver, and it's not that far." "Not that far. 3 miles on roads that were becoming impassable in a storm that emergency services are calling dangerous to life and limb. Can't Can't she help?" "Oh, sweetheart, Brianna's got the kids to think about. She can't leave them alone in this weather. And honestly, with her heat pump situation, she really needs to stay home and monitor things." Her heat pump situation, the one that was being fixed today with my money while she wore my coat to client dinners. "I don't think I can make it in this weather." Silence. Then, "Tessa, I'm really surprised. Your father is stuck and you're the only one who can help. I know it's not convenient, but family helps family. Family helps family, the phrase that had cost me my savings, my coat, and apparently now my safety. The weather service said not to travel unless it's life-threatening. This could become life-threatening. If your father tries to dig the car out himself and hurts his back, or if he has a heart attack from overexertion, I just can't believe you'd let that happen when you could prevent it." I could picture the scene. Dad stubborn and determined, refusing to wait for morning, insisting he could handle it himself. Mom worried and helpless, both of them looking toward me to solve a problem that could easily wait 12 hours, but wouldn't because patience had never been a family virtue when there was someone else available to bear the risk. Outside my window, the storm raged like something out of a disaster movie. Snow was piling up against the glass, and the wind sounded like it was trying to tear the building apart. "I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and stared at my phone for 30 seconds, watching the screen fade to black. Outside, the wind howled like something alive and angry, rattling the windows hard enough that I wondered if the glass might actually break. My car keys were on the kitchen counter where I dropped them an hour ago, still cold from the metal. I picked them up and felt their weight. Such small things to hold the power over whether I lived or died tonight.
Because that's what this was about. Maya was right, and Liam was right, and some part of me had always known it was right. This wasn't about helping family. This was about my family's complete inability to see me as a person whose life had value. I thought about Dad, stubborn and prideful, probably already putting on his boots to go back outside. I thought about Mom, genuinely worried but somehow convinced that the solution was to put her other daughter at risk rather than call a professional or wait 12 hours for safe conditions. I thought about Brianna, warm and safe in her house with her children, wearing my coat, while I prepared to drive through a blizzard in a jacket that wouldn't keep me alive if my car broke down. My phone buzzed. A text from Brianna. "Stay safe tonight. The storm is crazy. Thank God we got the heat fixed today." Thank God we got the heat fixed today. With my money while she wore my coat, while they asked me to risk my life to solve a problem that could wait until morning. I set the keys back down on the counter. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Tessa?" Mom's voice was hopeful. "Are you on your way?" "No," I said. "I'm not coming." Silence. Then, "What do you mean you're not coming?" "I mean the National Weather Service says travel is life-threatening. I mean it's -10 degrees and there's a blizzard. I mean Dad's car can wait until morning." "Tessa, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Your father needs help. Dad needs to stop being stubborn and wait for the storm to pass, or call a tow truck in the morning, or ask Brianna to help. Brianna has children to protect, and I have a life to protect, mine." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Mom's voice came back, colder than the wind outside. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately. This isn't like you." "You're right. It's not like me. The old me would already be in the car, risking my life because I was too afraid to disappoint anyone. But you know what? I'm tired of being that person. Your family should be able to count on you. My family should care whether I live through the night." I hung up. My phone started ringing immediately. I turned it off. For the first time in my adult life, I had said no to a family request and meant it. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating and made me want to throw up all at the same time. I made another cup of tea and sat by the window watching the storm rage outside. The parking lot was completely white now, cars transformed into anonymous snow-covered mounds. Even if I'd wanted to change my mind, it was probably too late. The roads looked impassable. Someone knocked on my door at 12:47 a.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Liam, holding what looked like a thermos and wearing the kind of heavy-duty winter gear that suggested he actually understood how dangerous the weather was. "Hey," he said when I opened the door. "I saw your lights were still on. Thought you might want some hot chocolate." "That's really nice, but also wanted to make sure you weren't planning to go anywhere tonight. I heard you on the phone in the hallway earlier." I accepted the thermos, grateful for the warmth seeping through the metal. "You heard that?" Thin walls. "Sounded like someone was asking you to drive somewhere." He looked past me towards the window where the storm was visible in all its fury. "Please tell me you told them no." I told them no. Relief crossed his face. "Good, because I've been on 3 hypothermia calls already tonight, and that's just the people who were stupid enough to go out in this." I sipped the hot chocolate. It was perfect. Real cocoa, not the powdered kind, with a hint of cinnamon that warmed me from the inside out. "Can I ask who was asking you to drive in this?" "My family. My dad's car is stuck in their driveway." Liam stared at me. "They asked you to drive across town in a blizzard to dig out a car?" "Pretty much. And they couldn't wait until morning because they never wait, because someone else always fixes their problems, so they never learn to solve them safely." I realized I was gripping the thermos hard enough to hurt, because apparently my life is less important than their convenience. Jesus. He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, that's really messed up." It was such a simple statement, but hearing someone else acknowledge how wrong it was made something crack open in my chest. They took my savings, all of it, for my sister's house and her heating system. And they took my winter coat too, the warm one I bought to replace this piece of garbage. I gestured at the thin jacket hanging by the door. They took your coat? Borrowed, temporarily, except my sister's wearing it to client dinners while asking me to drive through a blizzard. Liam was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the storm. You know what's funny? In my job, we see a lot of families in crisis. And the healthy ones, they protect each other. They don't ask the most vulnerable person to take the biggest risk. I'm not vulnerable. You're the one they always ask for help. You're the one who always says yes. You're the one driving around in a jacket that won't keep you alive if your car breaks down. He met my eyes. That makes you vulnerable. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't because he was right. So, what do I do now? Now, you stay safe and warm and let them figure out their own problems. And tomorrow, when this storm passes, maybe you start figuring out what boundaries look like. He was right about that, too. I woke up Saturday morning to 18 missed calls and 47 text messages. The messages started concerned, "Are you okay? We haven't heard from you," and escalated to angry. "This is so unlike you. What's wrong?" Before settling into manipulative. "Dad hurt his back trying to move the car himself. Hope you're satisfied." The last message was from Brianna, sent at 3 a.m. "Mom told me what happened. Really disappointed in you right now. Family is supposed to stick together." I looked out my window at a world transformed by snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind drifts that reached halfway up car windows and a crystalline landscape that looked like something from a fairy tale. It was beautiful and peaceful and utterly impassable. According to the news, the city wouldn't have the roads clear until late afternoon. Even if I'd tried to go help last night, I would have been stranded or worse. My phone rang. Maya. "Please tell me you're alive and didn't do anything stupid last night." "I'm alive and I didn't go." "Thank God. I was awake all night worrying you'd convinced yourself to drive through a blizzard for people who don't deserve it." "They're pretty angry about it." "Good. Let them be angry. Maybe next time they'll think twice before asking you to risk your life for their convenience." "Dad hurt his back." "Did he die?" "No."
Then he learned a valuable lesson about not going out in blizzards, which he could have learned without involving you at all. I spent the day ignoring my phone and watching the city dig itself out. Snowplows worked steadily to clear the main roads. Neighbors helped each other shovel driveways. Normal people doing reasonable things to solve weather-related problems. At 4 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole expecting Liam, but saw Brianna instead, still wearing my coat. I didn't open the door. "Tessa, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I stayed silent. "Look, I know you're upset about last night, but this silent treatment is childish. Mom's really worried about you, and Dad's back is genuinely hurt. The least you could do is apologize." Apologize. For not risking my life to solve a problem that wasn't urgent and wasn't mine. "I'm not leaving until you open this door," she said. I opened it. Finally! She stepped inside without being invited, bringing cold air and the scent of my own expensive coat. "We need to discuss what happened last night." "What happened last night is that you asked me to drive through a blizzard, and I said no." "What happened is that Dad needed help and you abandoned your family." She was using her disappointed older sister voice, the one that had made me feel guilty as a child. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't who you are." "You're right. This isn't who I was, but it's who I'm going to be from now on." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I want my coat back. Now." "Tessa." "Now, Brianna." For the first time in my life, my sister looked uncertain.
like she'd finally realized that the person she'd been taking from had limits after all. She took off the coat slowly, like she was giving up something that had always belonged to her. I put it on immediately, feeling the warmth and weight of it, remembering why I'd worked so hard to buy it. "I don't understand why you're being like this," she said. "I'm being like someone who matters. You should try it sometime." 3 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment. A real apartment with working heat and a dishwasher and windows that didn't rattle when the wind blew, signing the lease papers that made it officially mine. "Congratulations," said the landlord, a kind woman in her 60s who'd actually reduced the security deposit when she found out I worked 2 jobs. "I think you're going to be very happy here." I looked around the sunny living room with its hardwood floors and functioning radiators and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride in something that was entirely mine. It turned out that not giving away $7,000 to fund other people's dreams meant I could afford a much nicer place than the drafty shoebox I'd been living in. Who would have thought? The apartment was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house with tall windows that let in actual sunlight and a kitchen where I could cook real meals instead of surviving on whatever fit on a hot plate. The bathroom had a bathtub, an actual bathtub where I could soak after long shifts instead of standing in a shower that only produced lukewarm water on good days. Every detail felt like a small miracle. The thermostat that I could control, the outlets that didn't spark when I plugged things in, the neighbors who didn't blast music at 3 a.m. or have screaming fights in the hallway. These were the kind of basic comforts that most people took for granted, but felt revolutionary to someone who'd been sacrificing them for years to fund other people's emergencies. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Send pictures immediately. I want to see everything." I spent 20 minutes taking photos of every room, every closet, every detail that proved I'd finally done something for myself, instead of sacrificing it for someone else's crisis.
The family group chat had been silent for 2 weeks now. The last message had been from Mom, a passive-aggressive reminder about Dad's birthday dinner that pointedly didn't include an invitation. I'd been officially disinvited from family gatherings until I, quote-unquote, came to my senses and apologized for abandoning them during the storm. I wasn't holding my breath for an apology invitation. The silence should have hurt more than it did. For 29 years, I'd been terrified of disappointing them, of being excluded, of being seen as selfish or difficult. Now that it had actually happened, I realized something surprising. It felt like freedom. At first, the guilt had been overwhelming. I'd spent weeks second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd overreacted, if maybe I should call and smooth things over like I always did. But then I'd gotten my first full paycheck that I didn't have to mentally divvy up between my own needs and someone else's crisis, and I remembered why I'd drawn the line in the first place. The math was simple. In the 3 months since I'd stopped funding my family's emergencies, I'd paid off 2 credit cards, built up a real emergency fund, and still had enough left over to furnish my new apartment with actual furniture instead of hand-me-downs and curb finds. Apparently, I'd been living in poverty not because I didn't make enough money, but because I'd been giving it all away. Brianna had tried calling a few times in the first weeks after the storm, usually when she needed something, advice about the house purchase, help moving furniture, someone to watch the kids. I'd let the calls go to voicemail and deleted them without listening. Whatever emergencies or opportunities she was dealing with now, she'd have to figure them out without my bank account or my labor. I'd heard through Maya, who'd run into a mutual friend, that Brianna and Clay had actually bought their house. Apparently, Clay's company had come through with even more assistance than expected, covering not just the heating system, but also offering a low-interest loan for first-time homebuyers. They'd never actually needed my money at all. They just wanted it because it was easier than exploring their other options. The realization should have made me angry, but mostly it just confirmed what I'd already suspected. I'd been their first resort, not their last. When you always say yes, people stop looking for other solutions. "You seem different," Liam had said the week before when we'd run into each other in the lobby. "Lighter, somehow." He was right. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's problems on my shoulders. I wasn't calculating how much of my paycheck I could afford to give away or how much of my time I could sacrifice to solve crises that weren't my responsibility. The moving truck arrived at noon, carrying the minimal furniture I'd accumulated and the boxes of books and clothes that represented my actual life rather than the one I'd been funding for other people. Liam appeared as I was struggling with a particularly heavy box of kitchen supplies. "Need a hand?" he asked, already reaching for one end of the box. "I've got it," I said automatically, then caught myself. "Actually, yes, that would be great." It was a small thing, accepting help, but for someone who'd spent years being the helper and never the helped, it felt revolutionary. "I'll miss having you as a neighbor," he said as we loaded the box into the truck. "But this new place sounds amazing. It has a dishwasher," I said, like this was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me, which, honestly, it might have been. "Living the dream," he grinned. Then his expression turned more serious. "How are things with your family?" "Complicated. They're not speaking to me right now." "I'm sorry. That has to be hard." "It is," I admitted. "But it's also peaceful. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to manage their emotions and their problems. Now that I'm not doing that anymore, I feel like I have room to breathe." "Good for you. Family relationships are supposed to add to your life, not drain it." As I drove across town to my new neighborhood, I passed the street where my parents lived. For a moment, I considered stopping by, testing whether the silent treatment was still in effect. Then I kept driving. I had better things to do than chase after people who only valued me for what I could give them. The drive gave me time to think about how much had changed. 3 months ago, that street felt like a gravitational pull, dragging me back into the same patterns over and over again. Now it was just another road leading to a place I used to live, before I learned that home was supposed to be somewhere you could rest, not somewhere you had to constantly prove your worth.
I'd been worried that cutting contact would leave me isolated and lonely, but the opposite had happened. Without the constant drain of managing other people's crises, I had energy for actual relationships. I'd started staying after work to chat with my coworkers instead of rushing home to save money or take crisis calls. I joined a book club at the library. I'd even started dating. Nothing serious yet, but I was finally in a place where I could consider what I wanted in a partner, instead of just being grateful that someone was willing to put up with my family chaos. The new apartment was in a neighborhood full of small businesses and tree-lined streets, the kind of place where people walked their dogs and said hello to strangers. My upstairs neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, helped me carry boxes up the stairs without being asked and invited me to a neighborhood potluck the following weekend. "It's just a casual thing," he said. "Good way to meet people. No pressure." A neighborhood potluck. When was the last time I'd been invited to something social that didn't involve being asked for money or favors? When was the last time someone had wanted my company rather than my assistance? That evening, I sat in my new living room wearing my winter coat, the coat that had started this whole transformation, and called Maya. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Terrifying and amazing and like I should have done it years ago." "Any regrets?" I thought about it seriously. Did I regret keeping my money and buying a better life for myself instead of funding Brianna's house? Did I regret refusing to risk my life in a blizzard? Did I regret finally standing up for myself after 29 years of being a pushover? "No," I said, and realized I meant it completely. No regrets at all. Good, because you deserve to have nice things and people who treat you well and a family that doesn't see you as a walking ATM. "You know what's funny?" I said, looking around my warm, quiet apartment. "I always thought having boundaries would make me lonelier, but I feel more connected to people now than I have in years. When you're not constantly being drained, you have so much more to give to relationships that actually matter. That's because you're finally choosing relationships instead of just accepting whatever gets dumped on you." Maya was right. For the first time in my adult life, the people in my circle were there because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company, not because I was useful to them. It was a small group, but it was real. After we hung up, I unpacked my books and arranged them on the built-in shelves that had been one of the apartment's selling points. Real shelves in a real home,
paid for with money I'd earned and kept for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Liam. Got your number from your old mailbox slot. Hope that's not weird. Anyway, there's a new coffee shop in your neighborhood that's supposed to be amazing. Want to check it out this weekend? No pressure." I stared at the message for a long moment. A casual invitation from someone who liked my company, someone who'd shown up with hot chocolate during a blizzard just to make sure I was safe, someone who saw me as a person worth caring about rather than a resource to be exploited. "That sounds perfect," I typed back. "I'd love to." Outside my new windows, snow was beginning to fall again. Not the angry, dangerous storm of 3 months ago, but the gentle kind that made everything look clean and new. I was warm and safe and finally building a life that belonged to me. I hung my coat in the real closet with its proper hangers and functioning light, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As I got ready for bed in my new apartment, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 months ago, shivering in an inadequate jacket, emptying her bank account for other people's dreams, too afraid of confrontation to value her own life. She felt like a stranger now, someone I'd once known but had outgrown. The person I was becoming, the person who could accept a coffee date invitation without immediately calculating what the other person might want from her, who could buy nice things for herself without guilt, who could say no and mean it, this person felt more real than I'd ever been. Some foundations had to be completely torn down before you could build something better. Some coats had to be taken away before you learned you were strong enough to take them back. Some families had to lose you before you could find yourself. And sometimes that was exactly what needed to happen. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in my own bed, in my own warm apartment, and make coffee in my own kitchen without checking my phone for crisis texts or calculating how much of my paycheck I could afford to give away. Tomorrow, I'd go on a date with someone who wanted my company rather than my resources. Tomorrow, and every day after that, I'd choose myself first. It had taken 29 years and a winter coat to learn that lesson. But some lessons were worth the wait.